We spend an enormous amount of energy imagining exactly how our plans will fall apart. We run endless mental simulations of failure, rejection, and embarrassment. But we rarely spend even a fraction of that time asking a much more interesting question: what if it actually works out? There is a psychological mechanism driving this asymmetry, known as negativity bias. It is a biological hand-me-down from our earliest ancestors. For a hunter-gatherer, assuming a rustling bush was just the wind could mean getting eaten. Assuming it was a predator, even if it wasn't, kept you alive. We are the genetic descendants of the people who played it safe. That hypervigilance was necessary for dodging physical threats, but it actively works against our potential today. Our modern survival mechanism treats an innovative idea, a career change, a new business, a creative project, as a literal life-threatening danger. The human brain functions as an exceptionally well-designed idea-killing machine. It is hardwired to keep us secure and comfortable, prioritizing our immediate safety over our long-term growth. In our daily professional and creative lives, this ancient programming rarely looks like survival instinct. It looks like imposter syndrome. It sounds like self-doubt. This chart shows the life cycle of a new idea in the human brain. The moment the spark of inception hits, the brain instinctively forces it down a threat response pathway. To relieve that internal anxiety, we look outward. We take our fragile new concept to friends, bosses, or mentors, seeking validation from logical gatekeepers. Unsurprisingly, they usually assess the risk the exact same way we do, steering the idea into a dead end. The most rational, skeptical voices around us are often just the physical manifestation of our own evolutionary fear, spoken aloud by someone else. To see how this plays out in practice, we can look at the publishing industry in the early 1960s. A comic book writer named Stan Lee was handed a mandate by his publisher: invent a brand new superhero. The inception phase started with a mundane observation. Lee watched a fly crawling on a wall and figured a character who could stick to surfaces would make a compelling hero. He pushed the concept by breaking the established rules of his industry. He used a spider motif. He also made the character a teenager, a demographic that, at the time, was strictly reserved for sidekicks. Finally, Lee added one highly unconventional trait. He gave his new hero real-world, mundane personal problems. He wanted the character to face the same daily anxieties as his readers. True innovation requires combining traits that haven't been mixed before, and doing so inherently triggers the brain's risk alert system. When Lee pitched the concept, his publisher, a highly intellectual, logical man, gave a swift verdict. He told Lee it was the worst idea he had ever heard. The rejection was built on a series of rational arguments. First, he pointed out that people have an innate fear of spiders. Naming a hero after a widely hated pest was terrible branding. Second, teenagers lacked the authority to be leading men. Finally, superheroes were supposed to be flawless escapism. They did not have personal problems. The publisher wasn't trying to be a villain. He was executing the threat response pathway. He was negativity bias sitting behind a desk, calculating risk based entirely on what had kept them safe in the past. Limiting beliefs are difficult to overcome, precisely because they almost always sound flawlessly logical. Lee left the office disappointed, but he found he couldn't get the character out of his head. He bypassed the roadblock using a mechanism behavioral scientists call implementation intentions. Rather than fighting the fear head-on, you test your hypothesis in an environment where the stakes are too low to trigger the brain's alarm system. Lee had a magazine called Amazing Fantasy that was about to run its final issue. Because the title was being canceled anyway, management didn't care what went on to the printing press. Simply to get the character out of his head, Lee put Spider-Man in the final issue and forgot about it. Overcoming self-doubt rarely means eliminating fear. It means finding a risk profile small enough that you can take action anyway. A month later, the sales figures for that final issue came in, and Spider-Man became a massive commercial hit. The publisher suddenly came racing into Lee's office, eager to launch a dedicated series for the character they both supposedly loved so much. Stan didn't have a premonition of success. He used a form of cognitive reframing. He simply decided that his belief in the idea's intrinsic value was more important to him than the fear of its failure. The goal is not to convince yourself that every wild notion you scribble down is genius. The goal is to give the ideas that actually mean something to you room to breathe. As Spider-Man showed, a creative breakthrough often requires trusting your own definition of what is good over the consensus of what is safe. Lee looked back on this as a reason to trust good ideas even when they're unpopular. He argued that if you genuinely think an idea is good, you shouldn't let external skepticism talk you out of it. He believed that we produce our best work when we do it the way we think it should be done. That ownership allows you to take pride in the result, regardless of the immediate outcome. Next time you find yourself compiling a perfectly rational list of reasons to abandon a project, pause. Recognize that your brain is likely just setting an evolutionary trap, doing its job to protect you from the unknown. The path to doing something truly extraordinary in your life does not require the total absence of doubt and fear. It begins the moment you intercept your mind's worst-case scenarios and finally dare to ask, what if it actually works out?